Hello, and thank you for joining us this morning. I'm Terry Roberts with DMAI's Empowerment, and we are excited about today's webinar on savvy strategies for protecting your room block. And before we get started, I'd certainly like to thank ePro Meetings Apps. ePro Direct is our sponsor, and Craig Deal is on our call today, and we will be talking to him a little bit later at the end of the webinar so that he can explain to you the way ePro and their apps can help you with your meeting needs. But before we get officially started, I would like to welcome our two panelists for today. And first, TJ. Hey, TJ McCabe, how are you?
Hello there, Terry. I'm fine. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. TJ is an association and citywide convention management executive that has more than 25 years of industry experience, even though he's still got that baby face. And for the past 14 years, he's served as Director of Convention Services for the American Public Health Association and managed that exposition that attracts upwards of 13,000 plus attendees and scientific sessions and events, 700 exhibitors. So I think that he obviously comes with a wealth of knowledge about this room block issue, and previous career experience also puts TJ in that hotel perspective too, having worked for Hyatt Hotels. So I think, TJ, you really bring a wealth of information to our conversation today, and also being active as members of the citywide advisory boards in cities like San Diego, Denver, Philly, and in San Francisco. I know you'll have a lot to share with us. So we really appreciate you joining us.
Great to be here.
And then our right-hand gal, Rachel Benedict, who's the Vice President of Sales and Service with Visit Denver. Good morning, Rachel.
Good morning.
And Rachel has been with Visit Denver for the last 14 years. She's served in several positions there, and she was recently awarded the Vice President of Sales and Service role in 2009. That's not so recent anymore, is it, Rachel?
I know I'm getting out. I've outdated myself already, and most people have to know I started when I was a mere 12 years old.
There you go, you and TJ both. But we know, Rachel, that you were the lead in booking the DNC in Denver and some very large events like snow sports, which comes to Denver often, and you oversee the entire convention sales and services department of 28 plus folks there in Denver. So you also bring a wealth of knowledge to this particular conversation, as well as being really active in the industry and participating with many professional organizations like PCMA and ASAE. So we really appreciate you being here, and also being a great sales and marketing committee member for DMAI. So Rachel, your work in the industry is appreciated, and especially your participation here today. So we're going to start this conversation by this whole, how do we get around getting around the block? And without a doubt, accurate room block histories equal leverage for planners. And for the meeting planner, the number of rooms contracted and the number of rooms actually utilized in previous years is really kind of their organization's credit report, if you will. And it's the primary measure of how both hotels and even convention centers initially value a meeting. So standard practices in many destinations, I'm sure you'll agree, Rachel, is to follow booking guidelines for granting first, second, and third options to conventions based on that verified number of peak sleeping rooms. So being able to account for your attendees in your block is certainly important to the negotiation power of a planner. So today we're going to look at how many and which types of groups tend to kind of book around the block most from an annual survey that Rachel and the folks in Visit Denver take. And then we're going to get into a conversation about how to really get your attendees to appreciate the value that your room block brings to them. And then TJ and Rachel offer some strategies to create and stay on top of your room block. And we hope also to really be able to demonstrate how CVBs can help you create tighter room block control in any destination that you visit. So with that said, Rachel, I would like to turn to you and ask you to comment on this annual survey that you do. I know that you put a lot of time into understanding room block control, and talk to us about your annual survey results.
Absolutely. So we all know, for everyone on the call, we're certainly not talking about what would be a new phenomenon or a new issue. What we're seeing here is something that's really been a huge issue for several years, and what we decided to do is we decided to get a little bit more involved in understanding what really is the value that these groups are bringing to the city, because what we're finding nowadays is that you can't just look at sometimes that room pickup and that won't tell the whole story. So we're actually going out and we're reaching out to, I would say, up to about 5 groups a year that vary in size. And the way we're assisting them is most groups now, you guys, all the meeting professionals on the call are savvy enough where you're probably doing those audits at your contracted hotels. So what, as a DMO, we're able to bring to the table is we're actually going out to your non-contracted hotels. So we're going out to the hotels in the rest of the city and saying, you didn't have a contract with this group, but we would like you to flush this registration list against your arrival and departure and tell us if you had these people in your hotel. Because what we find is we all love our hotel partners, but at the end of the day, they're probably coding someone more times than not as a business transient traveler who probably is a booking out of the block convention attendee. And what we found year over year is we're seeing still anywhere from 10 to up to 34% of attendees that are outside of the official block. And where it happens go ahead, Terry.
I was just saying that's a significant number.
It is, and it's even jumped. You know, even in 11, you know, I'd say our average was about the average of the groups that we audited was roughly about 15%. The average for 2012 was 24%. So again, certainly not going away, and we do think we're going to talk today about some ways to mitigate that, but each city's a little different, and in Denver, for instance, it's really those kind of the smaller groups or even the mid-sized groups that we worry about the most. So if there's people that come into our city and they say, gosh, we're going to contract 6,000 rooms on our peak night, those groups, obviously, that problem sort of solves itself because they're basically using every single downtown hotel at that point. But the groups that aren't, that's when we're having those conversations about what's the right number, where should you be, what hotels should you be looking at to try to make sure that you're minimizing your risk as much as possible.
So Rachel, just explain then, why would that smaller or mid-sized group be at more risk?
Sure. So what happens is, let's say you want, I don't know, let's say you've got 1,200 peak rooms that you want to contract in our city. In downtown Denver, we have close to 9,000 total rooms. So what happens is, if you're working with your DMO, we're going to help you with this, because if you're coming in during a time where there's not a lot of demand, so there's not a lot of other groups in the city, maybe you're using convention center space, but you're not using all of it, so we've got convention center space available, and we've got lots of other hotels that are sitting open. What's going to happen is you're going to go in and you're going to settle on what you feel is hopefully an achievable rate that's going to work for your organization. And then what happens is all the other hotels start dropping their product onto the OTAs. And that's when you see, and we all know our attendees are going on and they're saying, okay, here's our official hotel at XYZ per night, and they're going on and finding that they can get something just as close to the convention center or just in the same neighborhood, in the same block, in the same area of downtown for much cheaper. So for the mid and smaller size groups, there's just a lot of inventory, and if there isn't a lot going on, that inventory is going to be available. And when lots of inventory is available, it inevitably just really starts to drive the prices down.
So it's really just about that small and mid-sized group having more choice, where a large citywide kind of maximizes inventory and doesn't really offer the same opportunities for attendees.
Absolutely. Yep. When you're utilizing, the more hotels you're utilizing in the downtown core in our city, the less able your people are to find something, quote unquote, out of the block, unless they want to overflow into some areas that may require a taxi ride, a shuttle ride, some type of alternate transportation.
Makes perfect sense. So TJ, then, I might turn to you to ask, well, then why does it really matter? Why does going around the block impact a planner? Why would you not just decide to contract fewer hotel rooms so you don't, have to be worried about attrition and then just be done with it?
Well, as you pointed out, the number of rooms contracted and actualized for every meeting is an organization's credit report. So overall hotel pickup and the economic impact that those hotel rooms and the attendees generate is how meetings are valued by cities, hotels, and convention centers. In the case of our large citywide meeting, that can be $30 million. It also impacts the amount of space that you might need to get. So you meet your hotel pickup and you get the space that you need at the convention center or the hotel. Hotels and the city are looking at this overall piece of business to make sure that the economic impact and room demand are maximized. Thus, that you're fulfilling your financial expectations, and that's the expectations for the city as well.
So really then, without the room block intact, you're not going to necessarily get what you want, right?
It depends. Again, it depends on the city. I mean, if it's an in-house piece of business and you're using one hotel, certainly they are looking very closely at the number of rooms you pick up, in addition to all the other revenue-generating things that you're bringing to the table. But they need to make sure that they're making their money. But in the case of some cities, you can't even book a meeting if you don't have a certain amount of room nights guaranteed. In order to get certain space at a hotel or the convention center. You can't even get into the city to book that meeting. So it's very, very important that you have your history and meet your financial.
Absolutely. So, Rachel, from a destination standpoint, how does all of this, how does the room block affect ultimately the economic impact for the city?
So it's a really good question, and as TJ mentioned, when you talk about economic impact or when you talk about how a DMO is going to evaluate, he mentioned it's a credit report. It's sort of like, you're sort of entering into this like dating relationship, and this is your profile, and you're saying, here's what I'm going to bring to the table. And if you don't have good information, and if you're not tracking it diligently, what happens is you put DMOs work with the clients, and then you're working with your stakeholders, which also, that's your hotel community. So it's the concern of over-promising and under-delivering really impacts our stakeholders because, as we all know, hotel rooms are perishable products. If they don't rent for that night, then that opportunity is gone, and that cannot be recaptured. So for us, the issue is you may have attendance, and you can say, listen, we have this many attendees coming, but I'll tell you there's two risks with that. One is that if you don't contract the rooms, for our hotels, they're saying that's a check that we can take to the bank. The rest of it's sort of a maybe, and they want the guarantee. So that's very important to the stakeholders. But the other risk is if you're not blocking appropriately, then you may risk having your people spill out into other areas of town, which may be great areas, but then you as an organization have to decide, okay, now are we going to have to add in the cost of shuttle? Now are we going to have attendees that are frustrated because they sort of walk away and say, gosh, Denver can't handle our business, when the truth of the matter is Denver can handle it, but if those rooms aren't contracted at the appropriate time, someone else will rent those rooms, especially if there's other demand generators happening in the city. So there's really several concerns with sort of not monitoring that and not being on top of it, because it really is a big piece to the puzzle when we look at that and we say, here's what they're asking us for on a room night basis, and here's what they're currently doing. And oftentimes what we see is there's a discrepancy, and we understand that. A lot of meeting professionals, you want us to show you more. So if you need 1,000 on peak, you want to see that you have options in our city. So you don't want to see me give you a grid that says, hey, we've got 1,001 rooms for you. Don't you feel like you have a lot of choices? No, you're going to want to see maybe 3,000 on peak so you can choose what makes sense for your attendee base. But again, the risk becomes if you're not taking those rooms and saying, we want these, then someone else is going to, and then I think there's just a lot of misperceptions that happen from that point out about the city and the overall attendee experience.
And also, as Rachel was pointing out, if you reduce your block to minimize your risk, you're diminishing the value of your meeting to the destination. But also, you may force you to turn away attendees who register late and have to find hotels outside of the block. Again, it depends on whether it's an in-house piece of business in one hotel or, as Rachel was saying, it's citywide in Denver. I mean, when we were in Denver, we filled the entire city, and in fact had to go out beyond the city because we were trying to look at our overall numbers and our history and what we've done and figure out what is best for us. We don't want to get into an attrition situation, but we have great history. We have 14 years of history here, so we can tell that and feel comfortable booking those rooms and knowing that our attendees will stay in those hotels as well.
Good points. And I think it's also important, Rachel, to mention that, convention and visitors bureaus are funded by those vested in tourism in the destination. So your ability to, make room night goals, which have been contracted, is really the foundation for your funding. So a reduction in room nights means a reduction in funding, which ultimately means fewer goods and services, which make the meetings less of a success for planners. So let's move on to talking about savvy strategies, perhaps for protection. And TJ, I'd like for you to first begin talking about why it's important for planners to provide a range of rates and how they might go about doing that at any destination.
Well, first of all, I think everyone needs to understand their group and understand the budgetary considerations that a group may have. At APHA, it's all public health related organizations, community health, government workers. So rate has always been a very, very important issue. So you need to make sure, we need to make sure, and again, it depends on your group, that you have rooms that are going to be applicable for students, for government employees, for those executives that can afford a higher rated room, or exhibitors. And you should need to include a range of hotel brands for those who are loyal to the points program as well.
And you made the point when we were talking earlier, TJ, about even really considering the contract language as well as you protect these range of rates.
I think contract language, and a lot of people don't realize that you can ask for things. It doesn't mean that you're going to get them, but you can ask for them. And again, your history helps you with that. If you have really strong history, you can go into a city and it helps you negotiate. You can, and when you're doing your contract, try to get language in there that spells out specifically how your reservations are going to be made. If they're going to be made directly with the hotel or an in-house meeting with a third-party official housing company, let them make sure that they know that. Include clauses that no rates will be offered that are lower than your official negotiated rates over the dates of your conference and meeting. Now, that they may or may not accept that. I've never had it not accepted. I've had people add that they maybe need to exclude rates that are in place for airlines or corporate clients that use hotels on a regular basis. But you don't want to get caught having your attendees calling the hotel directly and getting a rate lower than yours. And I think hotels really understand that now. I think you also need to put into the contract that the hotel agrees up front that an audit will be done following the meeting that compares your official meeting registration list with the hotel's reservation system. Because sometimes hotels, especially in the case of citywide meetings, hotels, no matter how much you market it or tell your attendees how reservations are to be made or inform the hotel how that's to happen, reservations are taken directly by the hotel. So you need to make sure that you do an audit. It's amazing the number of rooms that you can capture at the end of the meeting or even during the meeting. Keeping a good eye on that during the entire process is really important. The other thing, go ahead.
I'm sorry, TJ. I wanted to interrupt you to ask Rachel. Rachel, would you comment on this meticulous history point that TJ brought up? Because I know that some planners have taken over a new meeting or perhaps have a meeting that they don't have good history for, and how you might be able to assist in that regard.
You know, when it comes to the histories, it is really important, and with working with your local bureau, we can certainly help with that. We have a database that we access, empowerMINT, where we're pulling that type of information. So one is you can go on there as a meeting professional and check and see, okay, is my meeting listed on here? Is the information correct? But the biggest thing to look at is that information the same information you have? And if you don't have accurate history, start getting it, because those hotels are working for you at that point. Those are your attendees in those hotels, and it's really imperative. I think what we're all seeing right now, like our trend has been the shoulder nights. Our hotels are not typically filling on shoulder nights, and a lot of that is we all know we're doing more with less. The life cycle of a meeting is shortening for the most part. Most groups aren't adding days onto their meeting, so that stuff gets impacted. So again, you want to minimize your risk as an organization, but you also want the hotels to have a minimized risk, because if their risk is minimized, they're going to work with you more. So from a bureau perspective, we can help you develop that history. So if you don't have a housing company, and there's tons of great housing companies out there, and we work great with all of them, but we can offer a housing service for you. We can get you pickup reports. We can show you of your hotels who's selling out first. It's amazing sometimes when TJ says, know your attendee, really know your attendee. We have people that come in and say, we need 4- and 5-star hotels, and then we look and say, well, gosh, you know the hotels that sell out first are all of our limited service. You know, so really...
Yeah, really getting that information and using it.
Yes, and if you don't have it, going to your local bureau and saying, can you help me with this? 1 year of good history, let me tell you right now, in a world that changes second by second, it seems, 1 year of good history is a good thing, and it's a heck of a start.
Right, perfect.
And if it's a new meeting, you know, everybody gets a new meeting dropped on their desk. Well, you can kind of, I always kind of look at our overall pickup for all of our meetings. And when I'm doing an RFP or trying to meet with a hotel, I'll say, this is what I anticipate. This is a new meeting, so I don't really know, but I can tell the way this program is laid out that people will be coming in the night before, but some people will be coming in the next morning. So, but the more important thing is to have a great relationship with your salesperson. If you're doing an in-house piece of business, they have their own reservation system as well, and they can monitor that, and you need to monitor it and be with them all the time and go, you know what? Pick up on the front end looks like it's really happening, and if we sell out the front end, we're not going to be able to sell out the meeting. So you got to really manage that and make sure that everybody's on board.
And TJ, I sort of interrupted you to ask Rachel to go in there, but how would you speak to what planners should do to monitor those pickups, and what would that audit look like from a planner perspective? And then Rachel, I'd like to ask you to speak to how the CVB in a destination might help with the audit.
Yep.
So your first part of that again, Terry, was?
Just monitoring weekly pickups, and then what does the audit look like after the meeting?
Again, depends on the meeting, but for our citywide meeting, we have, obviously we use 15 to 20 hotels, and we have, depending on the city, 5,500 peak. So we work very closely with our housing bureau, who is working with all the sales people and the convention service people in the hotels to make sure that our blocks are monitored, and we're seeing whether or not, are we falling off on the front end, are we falling off on the back end, have we already reached peak? Myself, I actually print reports. When it gets closer to the meeting, I'm printing reports every day, and I'm going back to my housing provider sometimes and saying, you know what, I know it's only 5 rooms here or there, but if we get those 5 rooms on the front end, we will get 15 more rooms on peak night. So it's really important to keep an eye on that.
And that would apply even if you didn't have a citywide meeting. Even if you're doing a small in-house meeting, this monitoring of the pickup can be done internally with the hotel person, and
Absolutely.
You still can do that onus of really staying on top of your block.
Well, the thing that's also changed when you're using either the hotel or a housing company, hotels have the ability to go online and see what your pickup is. You know, if anybody comes back to you and says, well, you know, I haven't gotten any information, well, yes, you can, because here's our login, and you can manage this every single day, and you and I can talk. But if you're doing an in-house piece of business, especially if it's a new piece of business, you should be on the phone with them all the time. as soon as registration opens, you need to really kind of look at what's the trend that you're seeing, because you can start figuring out the percentages of your peak night and what your shoulder nights are starting to look like, and kind of keep an eye on where that's going to take you by the time you reach the dates of your meeting.
Perfect. So last but certainly not least, I would like to talk about incentivizing or penalizing attendees who go outside the block, and some people have turned to those strategies. And then also what can be done to really educate attendees about the importance to both the organization and ultimately the future of services that will be available in the destination if the block is, respected with some integrity.
Well, I can tell you that for incentives, some organizations it works really well for, and there are some organizations that won't let people register for the meeting until they've made reservations at their official hotels. Okay. That never worked for us because our people, again, a lot of it's government related, and it takes a long time to process registration fees and all those kinds of good things. So as soon as housing opens, our hotels fill up very quickly. You may want to offer a lower registration fees if attendees stay at official hotels. That works for some people as well. Or offer access to online recording sessions, or make sure that they know that complimentary shuttle service is only running from the hotels that are in the block. All those things, help them financially and give them incentive to stay at the block. The other thing for us, again, is that we kind of, in the last 8 years, the economy obviously has been affecting the room rate that we've been getting quoted. And I actually, instead of running away from booking business, we booked a lot of business because the rates were low. We knew that our attendees would stay at these hotels, that we would fill all of our obligations, that financially we would be in great shape, and the city would be in great shape, and that our facilities would be in great shape.
Great. Rachel, what do you think about this whole idea of educating attendees? And I'm going to bring up a slide now that, we did a little surveying, if you will, as we prepared for this webinar, and actually went online and pulled up some registration information for a number of upcoming meetings. And what you would find is that the emphasis on reserving sleeping rooms at the contracted hotel was kind of lukewarm at best. So give me your thoughts about this.
I think in some ways it's like anything. Increased communication and telling your story really is never a bad thing. It may not change everyone's mind, but I think it's really critical to connect the dots with your attendees. And again, we do go back to this idea of know your attendees. So in TJ's case, he knows they're really rated. They're very conscious of how much money are they spending when they come to the city. So if you know that, then maybe you want to take that type of an angle. And maybe it's not a punishment, but maybe it's an education that if you stay in the official blocks, here's how it benefits you. Your registration rates stay lower. We are able to get to the cities that you have told us you want to go to. So it's really trying to connect the dots and understanding what resonates with your attendee. And we do that. It's much the same in a sales process. We have certain groups where we could talk to them all day long till we're blue in the face about convention center rental, and maybe their hot button is internet. So it's really critical to understand what's the hot button of your attendee. And if they're not attending, do you know why they're not attending? Is it rate, or is it that they always want to be close to where the meeting is, or they want to be in a different type of an area? Like, speaking to them from that standpoint makes a big difference. And I think oftentimes, Terry and TJ and I have talked about this over the years, but when you're working with your DMOs, people always think, like, I'm going to tell you all the great things about Denver, and I certainly am going to do that, but we're here to help you with all these other areas too. So if you have a housing company, we'll work with them. If you don't have a housing company and you need help, we'll help you. If you have never done an audit but think you need to and you want to figure out your attendee, your local DMO is there to help you with that. And we're going to bring things to the table that other people just don't know. You know, July is a perfect example. We have a group that's coming in July, and we had one of the attendees got my name on the internet, emailed me, and basically said, my mom wants to come to this meeting and all the hotels are sold out. Can you please help us? And sure enough, this was a group that probably didn't block enough rooms, and now we've got a lot of compression, but we were able to help that attendee, but then we were also able to help the organizer understand, like, gosh, I know in some cities in July, it's sort of downtime. Well, what we know is in Denver, June and July are our #1 and #2 demand months. So let us help you, because no matter what, we all have different goals and we all have sort of different bosses that we're all reporting to, but we intersect in one place all the time. You want more meetings, you want more attendees at your meetings, and we want more attendees at your meetings. And that's a great foundation for us to start with.
Yeah, and I think you make a good point, Rachel, about, you know, reaching out to your CVB isn't just all about finding out about the destination. It's all about receiving services that are specific to that destination. And TJ and Rachel, I think you both provided some really great insight to how planners can protect their block, use some strategies, and ultimately, Rachel, I think time and time again, as you've said, it comes down to communication. As TJ said, knowing your attendee and what is going to be demanded or needed by them, and then what may then also incentivize them or make them more attentive. So if you've enjoyed kind of hearing not only TJ's perspective, but also Rachel, and if you maybe have not worked with a destination expert, it's easy to find them online at empowerMINT.com, and they can help you not only with finding what you're looking for in the destination, but also checking your histories and making sure that you have those good reporting mechanisms in line. And there's over 880 destination experts that can help you at empowerMINT. We hope you'll visit us there. I know for many of you, receiving CMP credit for today's webinar is important, and you will receive 30 minutes of clock hour for Domain B, which is project management from CIC, and we will be sending you an email in the next 5 business days that will give you a certificate to print. So don't panic. We'll send it out with the recording of the meeting, so you will receive it sometime next week, and then you can simply list the course on your year in detail. So I'd like to take this time for just a few announcements. Number one is, if you enjoyed this topic and you're interested in further exploring it, DMAI and our Managing Director of empowerMINT, Christine Shimasaki, will be participating in another kind of related webinar next week, which is Perception versus Reality. How realistic are your room blocks? And I have listed there below the URL to register for that meeting if you are interested. And Shimo, do you know if there's CMP credit available for this meeting as well?
That's a really great question. I think you're going to have to log in to find out about that.
Okay, good enough, good enough.
But it's a topic that I think that, you know, judging by the dialogue we've had today with both Rachel and TJ, it's something to extend the conversation, and I think you're really going to be interested in joining Meetingsnet on this webinar next week.
Great. And I would like to take some questions. Hopefully both Shimo and Joy have held some questions for us. But before we get to questions, I would like to take a moment, as I promised, to introduce you to Craig Deal with ePro Meeting Apps and ePro Direct. Hey, Craig, how are you?
I'm great. How are you today, Jerry? Thank you very much for having us here.
Good. Just wondering if you could take a few moments to tell us a little bit about ePro and how you may help planners who are with us today.
Most definitely. ePro Meeting Apps is an industry leading in meeting apps, developing apps strictly for the meetings and events industry. Our entire staff's DNA was created from the ground of the meetings and the events industry. I myself have previously had a hotel career background that included over 14 years of operations as well as sales. And our service is truly hospitality grade. You won't be dealing with a techie that's going to speak Greek, but an industry professional that speaks meetings. Our apps are simple, really super simple to use, as we provide you with all the tools needed with all of our Excel-based worksheets. We develop custom native cross-platform apps that are designed for the iPhone as well as the iPads, Androids, Blackberries, and any Windows mobile devices, all for one low price. And included with our EMA apps, we have extensive and easy-to-use metrics as well as marketing materials that we can give that provides you with accurate reports and it can assist in cutting down on time spent coming up with your own copies to market your app. We got our metric reports. It's up to the minute, easy to download spreadsheets that provide important data not only for the planner, but also the exhibitors and sponsors that may have helped to fund and get their name and brand out there within your app as well. And so just know that when you go with ePro, you have a partner that understands what is important to you, the planners, as well as your attendees. And I just would like to thank everybody that is in attendance today. And when the time comes to investigate the mobile app for your event, just please keep us in mind.
Well, Craig, thank you, and we really appreciate your monthly sponsorship and participation each month with our webinars that are really getting a strong following, and we hope they'll reach out to you with their app needs as you provide solutions. Shimo and Joy, do we have any questions from the audience that perhaps could be directed either to Rachel or to TJ at this point?
Hi, this is Shimo. There was a request to show the URL to the next week's webinar, so Terry, if you could just kind of go back and keep that up for the viewers. And then we did have a question about what if we worked directly with hotels for smaller meetings? Rachel, could the CVBs help with that as well, with the smaller meetings?
Absolutely. I think that we have a lot of perception issues in our world, and one of them is that, oh gosh, I only have a small meeting. Guess what? We want every size meeting. We have 2 people on our staff, I know, and this is true throughout the country for the most part, that handle nothing but 10 to 150 rooms on peak night. So if you have single hotel meeting needs, we want to help you, and even with those, we want to work with you to develop, again, those good history reports and to get you that type of information as far as what's the best time to book our city based on what you need to be successful for your meeting. So absolutely, positively, 100% call us, let us help you, because really we are free, and I think sometimes that freaks people out, but the way we look at it is if you're coming to our city and you're staying in a Denver hotel room, you've already put a down payment on our services, so why wouldn't you start using them?
And we have another question. Thank you for that, Rachel. We have another question that maybe, TJ, you could address. But what are the best strategies to minimize booking with the opaque booking sites, you know, really relative to last-minute bookings after your cutoff date? Are you seeing planners do anything that proactively sort of keep the last-minute bookings at your contracted hotels?
Well, we actually ask, again, in our contract, we ask that the hotel allow us to sell, continue to sell, replace canceled reservations or continue to sell up until 2 weeks before or longer if they will let us. And our pickup shows that we continue to pick up to the day that our meeting starts. We do have to be careful, and I don't know if you were talking about, are you talking about rogue reservation companies, or we didn't touch on that, but that certainly happens as well, where people come in and say that they're the official housing company when in fact they're not. Again, on our websites and wherever you're marketing things, make sure that the information is clear of who your housing vendor is, what hotel you're staying in, and then to only use a certain number. There are some very reputable, when housing closes and you've reached your cutoff date, a few cities that we've worked with have companies that still have hotels, various hotel rooms around the city. At that point, we tell people that you can book through them. We won't be providing shuttle to that hotel, but we can retain the history of people that need hotel reservations and book at those hotels.
Thank you for that, TJ. And yes, you know, the opaque booking sites is when the hotel sort of remains unknown until, you know, really after the reservation is made. But I think that your answer does provide a great perspective on that. And then, Rachel, we have another question about your hoteliers. And how do you think they feel when the daily room night, the peak rooms aren't met, but the total cumulative room nights are met? Is that sort of the same thing?
That's a good question. I think that when overall the block commitments are met, everyone's happy. There's always going to be some play. So for instance, if you said, gosh, we contracted 200 total rooms at this hotel, and maybe 80 of it was on peak night, and maybe you didn't make that peak, but you achieved the 200, that's really what the hotel signed up for to some degree. Now, did they turn away other business on that peak night to accommodate your contract? That could be the case, but I think at the end of the day, in this day and age that we're living in, which is nothing but unpredictable, that's the one thing we can count on is change. I think that if the commitment is met, everyone's really happy. And I think that's the hard part is when you sell the future, you really have to build in some flexibility. And for you meeting professionals, you're trying to figure out what your attendees are going to do. And sometimes you have really good history and you can very accurately predict that. And other times you have really good history, but they're doing some weird things. So I think at the end of the day, that's a much better scenario to have met the total room nights for our hotels than to have sort of missed all the different measurements throughout. So you didn't meet peak, you didn't meet total, because that's the issue for the hotels is it's a perishable product. So they want to try to maximize as much as they can. I hope that answered it or helped.
Yes, thank you. And then the last question I think we have time for, Terry, really asks if there are any resources for sample contract language on attrition that protects the planner but also appeases the hotel. Are there any suggestions from TJ or Rachel about some resources?
I think anybody that takes any of your webinars or goes to PCMA or any of the other meetings, there are always contract classes that speak to this issue. Whether or not a hotel is going to accept attrition language or no attrition language really depends, again, on your history. I, for one, for our citywide meeting, we have such great history that I don't have attrition in my contracts. Now, that may be changing because we're going into a different kind of market, and we've all seen, we're in a buyer's market, we're not. But if you are proven piece of business to these hotels, and that they know that they can see that your pickup history is strong, it's a negotiating factor. You may not always get it, but it's certainly worth asking for.
Thank you, this is Terry, but I would point our planners also to the CIC, the Convention Industry Council's website. Their website has a really great resource in their APEX documents, PDF documents that are downloadable that have all kinds of RFP standards and language and different templates that are helpful for planners who may not have those documents available.
Yeah, that's a great point, Terry. That's true. Great resource.
And that's conventionindustry.org. Okay, Terry, I think that's what we have in terms of questions that we have time for today. And I think a lot of questions, though, came in about what the participants can expect in about 5 days. Is that we'll be sending the webinar?
Yes, it'll come direct to you. It'll come direct to you in an email from GoToMeeting, just as it did when you signed up and registered for this webinar. It will have not only the link to the recording, but it will have your certificate of attendance as well for you to print. So don't get anxious. You'll get it towards the end of next week, and we look forward to getting that out to you. And I'd really like to thank both TJ and Rachel. I think you did a great job today, and I think that is demonstrated by the fact of, now we've gone probably another 15 minutes into past our conclusion time and answering questions, and the very large bulk of our audience has remained to hear those questions answered. So on behalf of DMAI and empowerMINT.com, TJ and Rachel, we'd like to thank you for helping us really deliver another great webinar.